Welcome to the Local Housing Strategy Briefing on Main Issue 1, Housing Supply and Placemaking. It considers the factors which may influence how much housing is needed locally, including population and economic change. It looks at how well the current supply of housing meets the needs of local residents and communities. And it examines whether housing is affordable, whether there is a need for additional housing in Shetland, and charts the delivery of new housing supply. The local housing strategy will set out the vision for housing supply and housing services in Shetland over the next 5 years. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Island councils and partners must set out a new vision for homes and communities and set out priorities for action to tackle the main housing issues locally. Based on evidence of the local housing system in Shetland, it is proposed that the new local housing strategy is developed around the following 4 main issues. 1. Housing supply and placemaking. 2. House condition, energy efficiency and fuel poverty. 3. Promoting independent living. And 4. Homelessness and housing options. This briefing sets out evidence, insight and questions on the key issues which will influence decision making on future housing supply and placemaking. This briefing on housing supply and placemaking sets out the evidence and facts on housing need, demand and supply in Shetland. It sets out a starting position for decisions on how the new local housing strategy should enable the delivery of new homes and sustainable places to live. It raises questions and sets out the evidence on population and household change, local economic challenges and opportunities, the effectiveness of the current housing stock in meeting housing need, the operation of the local housing market and affordability of housing options for local residents, unmet need for housing in Shetland, and housing strategies to deliver a supply of new homes and great places to live. The population in Shetland has seen modest growth of 3% over the last 20 years. In contrast, the rate of population growth in Scotland was 7%, more than double the rate in Shetland. Despite sustained growth between 2000 and 2010, population numbers in Shetland have plateaued and in recent years have shown marginal decline. This trend is set to continue over the next 10 years with a 1% decline by 2028. The population in Shetland is also projected to age significantly over the next 10 years. The working age population will decrease by 6%, whilst the population of older people will increase by 22%. As a result, these projections could have a major impact on the local economy. Furthermore, an ageing population will require housing, health and care services to work in partnership to support older people in Shetland to live independently and well. Despite the marginal population growth in Shetland, the number of households living in the area has increased by 14% since 2001. Roughly the same rate of household growth than is the case for Scotland. Despite marginal population growth in Shetland, the number of households living in the area has increased by 14% since 2001, roughly the same rate of household growth as is the case for Scotland. In 2018, there was an estimated 10,384 households living in Shetland. Recent household projections produced by the National Records of Scotland estimate that the number of households living in Shetland will continue to grow over the next decade. Over the next 10 years, household numbers will increase by 3%, ensuring a relatively stable household base without migration into Shetland. The high migration scenario increases this growth to 3.4%. The Shetland economy is characterised by low unemployment, labour and skill shortages, and is heavily reliant on a few key sectors and locations. Despite low unemployment rates, full-time jobs in Shetland have been declining for a number of years, and there is evidence of underemployment, with 21% of employees liking to work more hours given the opportunity. Whilst the average annual median income in Shetland is 11% higher than the Scottish average, incomes are lower in rural and remote areas. Despite a relatively strong economic base, both Brexit and COVID-19 are exerting unprecedented challenges on the Shetland economy. It is important that housing investment is maximised as part of Shetland's economic strategy. Housing and economic growth are fundamentally linked, and a lack of suitable housing can be a barrier to key sectors of the economy, being able to recruit and retrain staff to grow their business and in turn grow the local economy. The capacity of the housing construction sector will also have a major impact on the ability to achieve Shetland's economic ambitions. Research into the economic impact of Brexit on local authorities defines Shetland as the second most vulnerable council area in Scotland. To mitigate the economic challenges faced by Shetland, a £335 million island growth deal was announced by the UK and Scottish governments in March 2021. Key investment priorities include net zero carbon energy and infrastructure, innovation, tourism, skills, creative industries, food and drink, aquaculture and housing. A key infrastructure project within the island's growth deal is the NAB redevelopment project, which places housing in place at the heart of Shetland's economic strategy. The Shetland NAB redevelopment project aims to go beyond creating a simple housing regeneration project by delivering a mixed-use site that embeds living and ageing well-being and a dynamic use of public space. The master plan vision for the site is to develop a new, future-looking community which links well with the town centre and delivers community facilities as well as up to 140 modern homes. The site offers an opportunity to diversify tenure options to meet different housing needs. Research into the economic impact of Brexit on local authorities defines Shetland as the second most vulnerable council area in Scotland. To mitigate the economic challenges faced by Shetland, a £335 million island growth deal was announced by the UK and Scottish governments in March 2021. Key investment priorities include net zero carbon energy and infrastructure, innovation, tourism, skills, creative industries, food and drink, aquaculture and housing. A key infrastructure project within the island growth deal is the NAB redevelopment project, which places housing in place at the heart of Shetland's economic strategy. The Shetland NAB redevelopment project aims to go beyond creating a simple housing regeneration project by delivering a mixed-use site that embeds living and ageing well-being and a dynamic use of public space. The master plan vision for the site is to develop a new, future-looking community which links well with the town centre and delivers community facilities as well as up to 140 modern homes. The site offers an opportunity to diversify tenure options to meet different housing needs, including mid-market rents, first-time buyer options, downsizing options and technology-based assisted living. The vision also aims for the delivery of energy-efficient, net zero, affordable housing that meets and ideally surpasses building standards. The NAB development will enhance the range of housing options in Lerwick and will provide local infrastructure that supports Shetland's ambitions in place. It will set an ambitious standard for how Shetland and its communities will develop over the coming decades, ensuring place and people are at the forefront of all that Shetland builds for its future. The NAB redevelopment project will be supported with investment of up to £9.1 million from the Scottish Government. There are over 11,000 dwellings in Shetland to meet the needs of the local population. Most homes in Shetland are located in the owner-occupier sector, 73%, which is significantly higher than in Scotland of 62%. The social housing sector accommodates just 1 in 4 households living in Shetland. Shetland has fewer smaller homes than is the case in Scotland. A third of homes in Shetland have 2 bedrooms or less, compared to 50% in Scotland. Analysis of the Council Tax Register in 2020 reveals that 9% of dwellings in Shetland can be classified as ineffective, either empty homes or second homes. This is significantly higher than is the case in Scotland, it's 4%. The scale of ineffective housing stock has a major impact on the ability of local households to meet housing need. There has been a 31% increase in the number of long-term empty homes in Shetland between 2008 and 2018. Bringing empty homes back into use could be a key consideration with the new local housing strategy. This approach could provide opportunities to enhance housing options in the private rented sector. Investing in long-term empty properties not only increases the supply of local housing, but improves condition of housing stock and helps to regenerate communities. Whilst the local housing market has shown positive growth in Shetland over the last 5 years, the market is patchy at a sub-market area level. House prices have grown steadily in Shetland by 17% over the last 10 years. Median house prices vary significantly by housing market area, with house price inflation peaking in South Mainland and Lerwick and Brassey. Whilst the local housing market has shown positive growth in Shetland over the last 5 years, the market is patchy at a sub-market area level. House prices have grown steadily in Shetland by 17% over the last 10 years. Median house prices vary significantly by housing market area, with house price inflation peaking in South Mainland and Lerwick and Brassey, and Shetland Mainland at over £150,000 per property. Market affordability analysis reveals that households in Shetland must spend 5 times the average local income to afford average house price, well in excess of the typical 3.5 times multiplier. Local residents and community groups were asked to rank the top housing challenges currently facing Shetland. The second ranking issue in the top 5 challenges was the affordability of local housing options. Analysis of housing affordability in Shetland reveals there are clear affordability pressures locally, particularly for those on low household incomes. A significant proportion of households in Shetland, 38%, earn less than £25,000 per annum, which is 7% above the Scottish national average. Incomes are lower in rural and remote areas, and high levels of underemployment are evident. This will drive housing affordability pressures. Whilst council rents are affordable for 4 in 5 households in Shetland, market rents are only affordable to 3 in 5 households. Market rents are out of reach for those households on lower incomes, for example those earning minimum or living wage levels. More than 40% of households in Shetland cannot afford to access the housing market, even at market entry level. There are 2,551 units of affordable housing across Shetland, with around 8% becoming available for letting each year. Demand for affordable housing in Shetland clearly outstrips supply, with roughly 4 applicants for every social tenancy that becomes available. The number of waiting list applicants to available homes shows major pressures for one-bedroom homes across Shetland, with the exception of Lerwick and Brassey. The impact of COVID-19 on local jobs and incomes, plus evidence of poor housing affordability in Shetland, is likely to increase demand for affordable housing in the area. Delivering more affordable housing could also be central to sustaining remote communities and the local economy. The Council must prepare a local housing strategy informed by an assessment of housing need in Shetland so that local housing requirements can be estimated. To produce the evidence required to calculate housing and land requirements, Shetland Island Councils has produced a housing need and demand assessment in partnership with the Scottish Government. The housing need and demand calculation works by projecting the number of new households who will require housing in Shetland over the next 20 years. This is based on household projections and economic scenarios produced by the National Records of Scotland. A range of scenarios have been tested within the housing need and demand calculation based on the 2018 population projections, which sets out principal, low migration and high migration population projections. If we assume that housing requirements will be based on a growing population scenario through high migration, Shetland will require housing in the region of 929 units over the next 10 years. More than 40% of this requirement is for affordable housing. The Strategic Housing Investment Plan is the delivery plan for meeting affordable housing supply targets across Shetland. Over the next 5 years, the Strategic Housing Investment Programme in Shetland will deliver 316 affordable homes, supported by over £19 million of funding from the Scottish Government. The 5-year housing supply target set in the Local Development Plan for Shetland was 710 homes. Analysis of total housing completions in Shetland over the last 5 years shows a significant shortfall in meeting housing supply targets in both private and affordable housing delivery. A key consideration in setting housing supply targets within the new local housing strategy will therefore focus on removing constraints and building capacity to increase the delivery of housing supply of all tenures in Shetland. The cost of building in Shetland is recognised to be significantly higher than the Scottish average. Recent tender returns for Shetland Housing Association suggest that current development costs are up to 45% higher than benchmarks for the Scottish mainland. Despite revised subsidy rates for affordable housing, the economics of development in Shetland will continue to be extremely challenging without making the case for further subsidy. Using the National Developed Place Standard approach, Shetland Island Councils undertook public consultation in 2016 to develop a Shetland Place strategy. The delivery of the housing and community element of the Place Standard was a key priority for local residents. This includes providing a good mix of quality homes that meets the needs of a range of households and provides a positive contribution to the local environment. A number of barriers to achieving the housing and community standard were identified, including a lack of availability of smaller housing units across Shetland, a lack of opportunities for young people to access appropriate accommodation, too many unused, underused and derelict properties. Shetland Island Council's Development Directorate is currently working with the Scottish Futures Trust and Hub North Scotland to develop a place-based model which joins up the planning and delivery of economic and social infrastructure investment, including housing, planning, net zero, transport and COVID recovery. It is essential that the new local housing strategy is closely aligned to the emerging Shetland Place model, supporting the delivery of sustainable homes and places. This briefing paper for supply and placemaking identifies a range of key issues which should be given careful consideration in the development of the new local housing strategy, including the impact of housing in addressing population and economic challenges, the impact of ineffective housing stock in meeting local housing need, evidence of limited housing market access for many local households, evidence of housing affordability pressures, particularly for local households on low incomes, evidence of unmet need for housing across Shetland which should influence housing supply strategies, evidence of the economic challenges of housing development on Shetland with construction costs significantly exceeding average benchmarks. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Council Shetland Island Councils need to prioritise the main housing issues that need to be tackled to set local priorities that will guide action, partnership and investment moving forward. This briefing has focused on housing supply and placemaking in Shetland, presenting evidence on the extent and nature of the problem and progress in tackling it since 2016. The purpose of the Local Housing Strategy Conference is to finalise the main housing issues that require intervention in Shetland, examine the main issues in detail, and generate ideas for action and investment. Key issues for consideration in the Housing Supply and Placemaking workshop are: is increasing housing supply and creating sustainable places a continued local housing strategy priority? What are the main challenges we face in increasing supply and promoting sustainable places and communities? And what has been proven to work, and what are our priorities for action?